I woke up on my 23rd birthday to the sound of my sister singing off-key in the kitchen. The scent of burning pancakes hit me before I even opened my eyes, and for one disorienting moment, I thought I was having a nightmare. Then I saw the crack in my ceiling, the one that looked like a dragon, and I knew. I was back. My hands trembled as I sat up, staring at them. Young hands, unscarred hands, not the calloused, broken things they'd become after years of scrubbing floors in that prison laundry room. My breathing came fast and shallow as I touched my face, my arms, checking for proof that this was real. The calendar on my wall read March 15th, 2019, 6 years before my death. 6 years before I died alone in a prison hospital bed, taking the fall for crimes I didn't commit, debts I never owed, while my sister lived in luxury with the man I'd loved. "Emma, get up, birthday girl." Claire's voice rang through the apartment, sickeningly cheerful. "I made breakfast, Ma Yisiyun." I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. Every betrayal, every lie, every moment I'd been too stupid, too trusting, too in love with the idea of family to see what was right in front of me. In my first life, this day had been the beginning of the end. Today was the day Claire would ask me for the favor that would destroy my entire existence. The favor I'd granted because I was a fool who believed that blood meant loyalty. But I wasn't that fool anymore. I got out of bed and looked at myself in the mirror. 23 years old, fresh out of college, working my first real job at a tech startup. I looked so young, so naive, so unmarked by the pain that was supposed to come. "Coming," I called back, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. I knew exactly what was going to happen today. Claire and her boyfriend Marcus would take me out for birthday drinks. They'd laugh and joke and make me feel special. Then, casually, over the third round of cocktails, Claire would mention that she was in a bit of trouble. Nothing serious, of course, just a small thing, a tiny favor between sisters. She needed to rent an apartment. The problem was she'd had some misunderstandings with previous landlords. Her credit wasn't great. There'd been some unpaid bills, some noise complaints, some property damage she definitely didn't cause. It was all so unfair. But Emma, sweet, successful, responsible Emma with her perfect credit score and stable job, could help. All I had to do was co-sign the lease. No, even better, just let her use my name entirely. I didn't need to be on the hook for anything. She'd pay all the rent, handle everything. My name would just be on paper. A formality, a sisterly kindness. And I, desperate for Claire's approval, dizzy from alcohol and attention, had said yes. In my first life, I'd said yes. The apartment had been in Manhattan, a luxury high-rise in Tribeca that should have been my first red flag. Claire had always championed expensive tastes, but this was beyond even her usual extravagance. 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a doorman, and a monthly rent that made my stomach turn. "Don't worry about the cost," she'd assured me, her eyes wide and innocent. "Marcus and I are both working good jobs now. We can handle it. This is just to get us in the door." I'd signed everything she'd put in front of me. Within 6 months, the rent payments had stopped. The bills had piled up. The landlord had started calling me Emma Chen, whose name was on the lease, whose credit was on the line, whose identity had been borrowed and destroyed. I'd tried to reach Claire. She'd stopped answering my calls. When I finally tracked her down, she'd looked at me with such cold disdain that I'd barely recognized her. "You think I'm going to pay for that place?" She'd laughed. "Emma, grow up. You signed the lease. That's your problem now. Maybe if you'd been smarter with your money instead of wasting it on your little tech startup dreams, you could afford it." The debt had consumed me. The landlord had sued. My wages had been garnished. I'd lost my job when my employer had discovered the legal troubles. My credit had been annihilated. And then the real nightmare had begun. Claire hadn't just used my identity for the apartment. She'd opened credit cards in my name, taken out loans, made purchases that totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars. And when the creditors came calling, when the lawsuits piled up, when the police started asking questions about fraud and theft, every finger pointed to me. Because my name was on everything. My signature was on every document. I'd tried to fight it. I'd hired a lawyer with money I didn't have. But Claire had been smarter than I'd given her credit for. She'd recorded our conversations, editing them to make it sound like I'd been complicit. She'd forged emails. She'd created a paper trail that painted me as the mastermind and her as the innocent victim who'd been manipulated by her scheming older sister. The trial had been a formality. I'd been convicted of fraud, identity theft, and a dozen other crimes. 15 years in prison. Claire had testified against me with tears in her eyes, playing the role of the heartbroken sister betrayed by her own family. The jury had eaten it up. I'd served 4 years before the cancer had killed me. 4 years of watching Claire's Instagram posts from behind bars, seeing her live my life, wear my success, build her happiness on the foundation of my destruction. She'd married Marcus in a ceremony that cost more than I'd make in 5 years. They'd bought a house in the suburbs. She'd gotten pregnant. And I died alone, in pain, with nothing. But now I was back, and this time, I knew every move she was going to make. "Emma, the pancakes are getting cold," Claire called again, and I could hear the slight edge of impatience in her voice. I smiled at my reflection. Let her wait. I got sauced, dressed slowly, deliberately. In my first life, I'd rush to please her, always afraid she'd be angry, always desperate for her approval. Not anymore. I pulled on jeans and a simple sweater, ran a brush through my hair, and walked into the kitchen like I had all the time in the world. Claire was already eating, her phone propped against the orange juice carton, watching something that made her laugh. She barely looked up when I entered. "Finally," she said, "I thought you were going to sleep all day." She looked exactly as I remembered, beautiful in that effortless way that had always made me feel plain by comparison. Long dark hair, perfect skin, the kind of delicate features that made people want to protect her. She was wearing one of my sweaters, she'd always helped herself to my clothes, and eating off my plates with my food that she'd never once offered to pay for. In my first life, I'd let her live with me rent-free for 3 months. She'd promised it was temporary, just until she got on her feet. 3 months had stretched to 6, then 9. She'd never paid a dime in rent or utilities. She'd eaten my food, used my Netflix account, and complained that the apartment was too small. "Happy birthday to me," I said dryly, sitting down. Claire glanced up, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Calculation. The look of a predator assessing prey. Then she smiled, bright and warm and completely fake. "Oh my God, I'm the worst sister ever." She jumped up and hugged me, her perfume, expensive, probably bought with money she'd borrowed and never returned, overwhelming my senses. "Happy birthday, Emma, 23, you're ancient." "Thanks," I said, extracting myself from her embrace. "These pancakes look interesting." They were burned on the outside and raw in the middle, a perfect metaphor for Claire's personality. "I tried," she said with a little pout. "I'm not the chef you are, but hey, Marcus and I want to take you out tonight. There's this amazing bar in Soho that just opened. Our treat, birthday girl." There it was, the setup, right on schedule. In my first life, I'd been so touched. Claire never spent money on me. The fact that she wanted to take me out had felt like a sign that she really cared, that our relationship was improving. Now I saw it for what it was, the bait for the trap. "Sure," I said, taking a bite of the disgusting pancake and forcing myself to smile. "Sounds fun." Claire's eyes lit up, and I saw it again. That flash of satisfaction, of a plan coming together. She thought she had me, thought I was the same naive, desperate for love Emma who'd do anything for family. She had no idea that I was the one setting the trap this time. The rest of the day passed in a blur of fake normalcy. I went to work at my startup, a small tech company that would go under in 2 years in my original timeline. In this timeline, I already knew which projects would succeed and which would fail. I knew which investments to make, which contacts to cultivate. I'd been working on securing my financial future from the moment I'd woken up in the past. But today, I went through the motions, played my role, the earnest young employee, eager and optimistic. My coworkers sang happy birthday. There was cake in the break room. It all felt like theater now, a play I'd already seen and knew all the lines to. That evening, I met Claire and Marcus at the bar. It was exactly as I remembered, trendy, overpriced, filled with people trying desperately to look like they belonged. Marcus was already there, nursing a craft beer and checking out other women with the same casual entitlement that had once made me think he was confident. Now I just saw him for the cheating, manipulative parasite he was. "Emma," he called out when he saw me, standing to give me a hug that lasted a second too long. his hand on my lower back in a way that had always made me uncomfortable. "Happy birthday! You look gorgeous." In my first life, I'd had a crush on Marcus. I'd met him first, actually, at a networking event. We'd talked for hours about technology and startups, and our dreams for the future. I'd thought we had a connection. I'd been working up the courage to ask him out when he'd shown up at my apartment one day, as Claire's new boyfriend. She'd stolen him right out from under me, and I'd never even told her I'd been interested. I'd swallowed my hurt and smiled and congratulated them and pretended my heart wasn't breaking. Later during the trial, I discovered that Claire had known exactly what she was doing. She'd seen my interest in Marcus and had pursued him specifically to take him away from me. She'd told him lies about me being controlling and jealous. She'd poisoned him against me from the start. And Marcus, spineless Marcus, had gone along with it because Claire was beautiful and I was just... Emma. "Thanks, Marcus," I said now, stepping out of his embrace quickly. "You look good too." He did. Objectively. Tall, athletic, the kind of square-jawed handsomeness that photographed well. But I knew what was underneath the attractive surface now. I knew about the gambling debts, the cocaine habit he hid from Claire, the other women, the violence that would eventually emerge when Claire was pregnant and vulnerable. I knew everything, and I was going to use it all. We ordered drinks, expensive cocktails that Marcus insisted on buying, playing the generous boyfriend. Claire was already on her second martini, getting that glassy look in her eyes that meant she was working up to something. "So, Emma," she said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "we need to talk to you about something." "Oh?" I took a sip of my drink, playing innocent. "It's about our living situation," Marcus said, his voice serious. "We need to make a change." Here it came, the script I knew by heart. Claire reached across the table and took my hand. "Emma, I know I've been staying with you for a while now, and you've been so amazing and generous, but Marcus and we're getting serious. We need our own place. Somewhere we can really start building our life together." "That makes sense," I said, nodding. "You should definitely get your own apartment." Claire's smile tightened slightly. That wasn't the response she wanted. "Right. Well, here's the thing." She exchanged a glance with Marcus. "I've been looking at places, but I'm having some trouble with the applications. There were some misunderstandings with my previous landlords. Totally not my fault, but you know how these things follow you around." "What kind of misunderstandings?" I asked, even though I knew. I wanted to hear her lie to my face. "Oh, just stupid stuff. A noise complaint here, some confusion about move-out damages there. You know how landlords are? They'll blame you for anything to keep your security deposit. And now my credit isn't great, so these places won't even look at my applications." "That's too bad," I said sympathetically. "But we found the perfect apartment," Marcus jumped in. "It's in Tribeca. Amazing location, great amenities. The problem is, they want someone with strong credit to sign the lease." They both looked at me expectantly. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm slightly. "And you want me to co-sign?" I finally said. "Not exactly," Claire said quickly. "See, if you co-sign, you'd be on the hook too, and that doesn't seem fair. We just need to use your name for the initial application. Once we're in and they see we're paying on time, we can transfer it to my name. It's just to get through the door. You wouldn't be responsible for anything." It was such a perfect lie, so smooth, so practiced. I wondered how many times she'd rehearsed this in the mirror. "I don't know," I said slowly. "That seems like it could be complicated." "Emma, come on." Claire squeezed my hand harder. "We're sisters. When have I ever let you down? I just need this one favor. I'd do the same for you." She wouldn't. She never had. But in my first life, I'd believed her. "What about your name on the lease?" I asked. "Would you be on it at all?" "Well, no," Marcus said. "That's the whole point. My credit isn't great either. I had some student loan issues, so we need someone with a clean record. That's you." "And you're sure you can afford the rent?" I pressed. "How much is it?" $4,000 a month, Claire said casually, like it was nothing. I nearly choked on my drink. In my first life, I hadn't asked. I'd just assumed they'd found something reasonable. $4,000 a month was more than I made at my startup job. That's a lot, I said carefully. We can handle it, Marcus assured me. I just got a promotion. Claire's picking up more shifts. We've got it covered. This is just a paperwork thing, Emma, a formality. I looked between them. These two people who'd destroyed my life, who'd stolen everything from me, who'd sent me to prison and never looked back. And I smiled. Okay, I said. I'll do it. The relief on their faces was almost comical. Claire actually teared up. Oh my God, Emma, thank you. Thank you so much. You're the best sister in the world. She hugged me across the table, nearly knocking over her martini. We really appreciate this, Marcus said, looking genuinely grateful. You're saving us here. What are sisters for? I said sweetly. We spent the rest of the evening celebrating, though what they were celebrating and what I was celebrating were two very different things. They ordered more drinks, got progressively drunker, talked about their plans for the apartment, how they'd decorate, the furniture they'd buy, the life they'd build. I listened and smiled and made appropriate noises while my mind raced ahead, planning every detail of their destruction. Because here's what they didn't know. I wasn't going to just let them use my name. I was going to help them. I was going to be so helpful, so involved, so supportive that they'd never suspect what was really happening. And when the time came, when the trap finally sprung, they wouldn't know what hit them. The next week, we went apartment hunting. Well, technically, we went to see one specific apartment. The one Claire and Marcus had already picked out. The one they'd planned this whole scheme around. A luxury high-rise in Tribeca with marble countertops and a view of the Hudson. The leasing agent was a polished woman in her 40s named Patricia, who looked at Claire and Marcus with barely concealed disdain, and at me with professional courtesy. Ms. Chen, she said, shaking my hand, thank you for coming in. I understand you'll be the primary leaseholder? That's right, I said, playing the responsible older sister. Claire and Marcus will be living here, but I'll be on the lease to help them out. How generous of you, Patricia said in a tone that suggested she'd seen this exact scenario play out a dozen times before. I should warn you that as the leaseholder, you'll be fully responsible for any damages, unpaid rent, or lease violations. Emma understands that, Claire said quickly, her smile tight. But it won't be an issue. We're very responsible. Patricia looked at her like she was a particularly naive child. Of course. Well, let's take a look at the apartment. It was beautiful. I had to give Claire credit for that. The apartment was stunning, with hardwood floors and stainless steel appliances and huge windows that flooded the space with light. The kind of place I dreamed of living in someday, back when I was young and stupid and thought hard work would actually pay off. We'll take it, Claire announced before we'd even finished the tour. Excellent, Patricia said. I'll drop the lease paperwork. Ms. Chen, I'll need your employment verification, bank statements, and credit report. We run a thorough background check on all our tenants. Of course, I said. I'll get you everything you need. And I did. Over the next few days, I provided every document Patricia requested. I filled out forms, I answered questions, I was the model applicant. Stable job, excellent credit, no criminal record, everything a landlord could want. But I also did something else. I went to see a lawyer, not just any lawyer, one of the best tenant rights attorneys in the city, a woman named Sarah Goldstein, who I'd found during my desperate legal battles in my first life. Back then, I hadn't been able to afford her rates. Now, with the money I'd been carefully saving and investing with my knowledge of the future, I could. I need to protect myself, I told her in her Midtown office. My sister wants to rent an apartment using my name. I know it's a bad idea, but I can't talk her out of it. I want to make sure that if things go wrong, I'm covered. Sarah looked at me over her glasses, her expression shrewd. If you know it's a bad idea, why are you doing it? Family, I said simply. She sighed. I've heard that before. Listen, if you're going to do this, we need to set it up properly. I'm going to draft a separate agreement between you and your sister that clearly states she's responsible for all rent payments and damages. We'll have it notarized. It won't get you off the lease, but it will give you legal recourse against her if she defaults. Perfect, I said. But that wasn't the only thing I did. I also went to see Marcus. I called him separately, told him I wanted to discuss some financial details about the apartment. We met for coffee at a Starbucks near his office. "Emma, hey," he said, sitting down with his venti latte. "What's up? Is there a problem with the apartment?" "No problem," I assured him. "I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page financially. This is a big commitment, and I want to protect everyone involved." "Sure, of course," he said, looking slightly wary. "I've had a lawyer draft up an agreement that says Claire is responsible for all the rent and damages," I explained. "I need both of you to sign it. It's just a formality, but it protects all of us." Marcus frowned. "Does Claire know about this?" "I'm meeting with her next," I lied smoothly. "I just wanted to run it by you first. Is there any reason you wouldn't want to sign it?" No, he said quickly. "That makes sense. Yeah, we'll sign whatever you need." "Great," I said. Then I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Marcus, can I ask you something? Off the record?" "Sure," he said, looking curious. "How are you really doing? Financially, I mean. $4,000 a month is a lot. Are you sure you can handle it?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, I mean, it's tight, but we can make it work. I got that promotion I mentioned, and Claire's picking up extra shifts. And you don't have any other debt? Student loans, credit cards, anything like that?" His face closed off slightly. "Why, are you asking?" "Because I'm putting my name on this lease, Marcus. My credit score, my financial future. I need to know that you're being honest with me." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Look, I've got some student loans. And yeah, some credit card debt. But nothing I can't handle. I'm working on paying it down." "How much?" I pressed. "I don't know, maybe 40, 50,000? In my first life, I'd later discovered it was closer to 90,000, not counting the gambling debts he'd hidden from everyone. But I didn't push. I just nodded sympathetically. "That's a lot," I said. "But I appreciate you being honest with me. Just promise me you'll prioritize the rent, okay? I'm really going out on a limb for you guys." "I promise," he said, and he looked so sincere that I almost felt bad for what I was going to do to him. Almost. The lease was signed 2 weeks later. I watched as Claire scrawled her signature on the sublease agreement Sarah had drafted, barely reading it, too excited about getting the apartment to care about the legal details. Marcus signed too, his hand steady despite the financial house of cards he was building. Patricia handed me the keys with a tight smile. "Congratulations, Ms. Chen. I hope you enjoy your new apartment." "I'm sure I will," I said, though I knew I'd never set foot in it again after today. Claire and Marcus moved in the next week. I helped them, carrying boxes and assembling furniture, playing the supportive sister. The apartment looked even better with their stuff in it, or rather, with the expensive furniture they bought on credit, the designer touches they couldn't afford, the champagne lifestyle they were determined to live no matter the cost. "This is perfect," Claire said, standing in the middle of the living room with her arms spread wide. "This is exactly the life I deserve." "It really is amazing," I agreed. What I didn't say was that it was also exactly the trap I'd planned for her. Because here's what I'd done while they were focused on furniture shopping and Instagram photos. First, I'd made sure the lease was absolutely, indisputably in my name. Not as a co-signer, not as a guarantor, as the sole leaseholder. Claire and Marcus weren't on the lease at all. They were my guests. Second, I'd created a paper trail a mile long showing that this was Claire's apartment, not mine. I had texts from her talking about her place. I had emails where she referred to it as her apartment. I had the sublease agreement clearly stating she was responsible for all payments. I had receipts for furniture she'd bought, utility bills she'd signed up for, mail she was receiving there. Third, and most importantly, I'd been documenting everything. Every conversation, every promise, every lie. I had recordings on my phone, saved emails, screenshots of text messages. I was building a case, piece by piece, evidence by evidence. In my first life, Claire had built her case against me. She'd been smart, methodical, thorough. She'd created a narrative where I was the villain and she was the victim. This time, I was going to beat her at her own game. The first month's rent came due. Claire paid it on time, and I breathed a small sigh of relief. Not because I cared about the money, but because I needed her to pay at least a few months to establish the pattern. I needed her to feel secure, to believe everything was going according to her plan. The second month, the payment was 3 days late. Claire had some excuse about a delayed paycheck. I smiled and said I understood. The third month, it was a week late. Marcus had some unexpected expenses. No problem, I said. These things happen. The fourth month, the payment didn't come at all. I texted Claire. No response. I called straight to voicemail. I went to the apartment. They were home. I could hear music playing, but they didn't answer the door. It was exactly like my first life, the ghost I'd been expecting finally showing up right on schedule. But this time, I was ready. I went back to Sarah Goldstein's office. "They've stopped paying," I told her. She didn't look surprised. "Do you want to pursue legal action against them?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to wait." "Wait for what?" "For them to dig themselves deeper." Sarah studied me for a long moment. "You know what you're doing, don't you?" "I do," I said. She nodded slowly. "Just remember, revenge is expensive. Make sure you can afford the cost." "I can afford it," I assured her. "I've been saving up for this for my whole life." 5 months passed. 6, 7, no rent payments. The debt was climbing, $28,000 now, plus late fees and interest. My savings were taking a hit, but I didn't care. This was an investment in something far more valuable than money. Meanwhile, Claire and Marcus were living their best life. Their Instagram feeds were a constant parade of luxury. Expensive dinners, weekend trips, designer clothes. Marcus had bought a car, a sleek BMW that probably cost more than my annual salary. Claire had gotten extensions in her hair and veneers on her teeth. They were burning through money like it was nothing, and none of it was going toward rent. I watched it all from the outside, documenting every purchase, every trip, every expensive bottle of champagne they photographed for social media. I was building a profile of financial irresponsibility that would make any judge's blood boil. Then, in month 8, Claire finally responded to one of my texts. "Can we meet?" She wrote. "We need to talk about the apartment." We met at the same bar where this had all started, almost a year ago now. Claire looked different, harder somehow, sharper. The sweet little sister act was gone. She sat down across from me with her arms crossed, defensive before the conversation even started. "So, she said, "I guess you want your money." "The rent has been due for 8 months, I said calmly. "That's $32,000, Claire." She laughed, but it was bitter, angry. "Emma, I don't have $32,000. If I had that kind of money, I'd have paid the rent." "Then how have you been paying for everything else?" I asked, gesturing to her designer purse. "The trips, the car, the restaurants." "That's different," she snapped. "That's living expenses. We can't just sit in the apartment and starve." "You could have paid rent instead of buying a BMW. The car is for Marcus's job," she said, rolling her eyes. "God, Emma, you don't understand anything about how the real world works." I stared at her, this person I'd once loved, once tried desperately to impress and please and protect, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "You're right," I said. "I don't understand, so explain it to me. Explain how you can afford everything except the one thing you explicitly promised to pay for." She looked away, jaw tight. "Look, we hit some rough patches. Marcus's promotion didn't work out the way we thought. I've been sick, missed some work. Things happen." "Things happen," I repeated. "So what's your plan, Claire? How are you going to pay back the $32,000 you owe me?" "I'll pay you back eventually," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Stop being so dramatic. It's not like you can't afford it. You make good money at that startup." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" she snapped, suddenly aggressive. "You want me to grovel? Fine. Thank you so much for helping me, Emma. You're such a saint. Is that what you want to hear?" "I want you to pay what you owe." "Well, I can't," she said flatly, "so either sue me or get over it." And there it was, the real Claire, the one who'd been hiding behind the sweet sister mask, the one who'd always been there, waiting for the moment she didn't need to pretend anymore. "Sue you?" I said slowly. "That's interesting. Because technically, Claire, you're not on the lease, I am. So if I sue anyone, I'd be suing myself. Something flickered in her eyes. Satisfaction. She thought she'd won. Exactly, she said. So you're stuck. You signed the lease. You're responsible. That's your problem, not mine. And the sublease agreement you signed? She shrugged. What sublease agreement? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo I'd taken. This one. The one that explicitly states you're responsible for all rent and damages. The one you signed and had notarized. She barely glanced at it. That's not legally binding. I talked to a lawyer. You can't just override a lease with some random contract. The landlord doesn't recognize it. As far as they're concerned, you're the tenant and I'm just your guest. She'd talked to a lawyer. Of course she had. She'd been planning this from the beginning, just like in my first life. So that's it? I said. You're just going to live in the apartment rent-free and let me deal with the debt? I mean, if you want us to move out, we can, she said, examining her nails. But that doesn't solve your problem, does it? You'll still owe the money. The lease is in your name, Emma. You're stuck with it no matter what. I stood up, gathering my things. I see. Thanks for being honest. Where are you going? Home, I said. I need to think about my options. She grabbed my wrist. Emma, wait. Look, I'm sorry it turned out this way. I really did plan to pay the rent. Things just got complicated. If you can float me for a few more months, I promise. I pulled my hand away. No. No? No more promises, Claire. No more chances. I'm done. I walked out of the bar and didn't look back. The next day, I filed for eviction. The process was exactly as I'd planned. I went to the landlord, Patricia, and explained the situation. My sister had been living in the apartment and had stopped paying rent. I wanted her removed. Miss Chen, Patricia said with a sigh, you are the leaseholder. You're the one responsible for the rent. If you want to evict someone from an apartment you're leasing, that's between you and them. I can't help you with that. I understand, I said, but I have a sublease agreement that makes her responsible. I want to pursue legal eviction based on non-payment. Patricia looked at the sublease agreement, then at me. This doesn't change the fact that you owe us 8 months of back rent. I know, I said, and I'm going to pay it. I just need to get my sister out of the apartment first. That's going to take months, she warned. The eviction process in New York is not quick. I know, I said. I'm prepared to wait. What Patricia didn't know, what nobody knew except me and my lawyer, was that I wasn't actually going to evict Claire based on the sublease. I was going to do something much better. See, while Claire had been living her best life in the apartment, she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd started a business. It was a social media influencer thing, beauty products, lifestyle content, the usual vapid garbage. She'd been posting constantly, building her brand, attracting followers, and she'd been using the apartment address for all her business correspondence. The apartment address. My name. My lease. She'd been running a business out of a residential property, which violated the lease terms. She'd been receiving shipments, holding photo shoots, even having beauty clients come to the apartment for consultations. All documented, all saved, all ready to present to the landlord. But that wasn't even the best part. The best part was what Marcus had been doing. See, Marcus had a gambling problem. I'd known that from my first life, but I'd been documenting it carefully in this timeline too. Every time he went to Atlantic City, every sports bet he placed, every poker game he lost. And where do you think he'd been hosting some of those poker games? That's right, the apartment. Illegal gambling in a residential property, another lease violation. But wait, there's more. Marcus had also started dealing cocaine, not in a big way, just to friends to fund his own habit. But dealing drugs out of the apartment, that was a criminal violation, not just a lease violation. And I had proof. Photos, video, testimony from people I'd carefully cultivated who'd attended Marcus's poker games and witnessed the drug deals. I'd been patient, I'd been thorough, I'd built a case that was absolutely airtight. And then I struck. I didn't just file for eviction. I filed a police report. I reported the illegal gambling, the drug dealing, the business violations. I provided evidence of everything, the photographs, the videos, the witness statements. And then I did one more thing. I changed the locks. It was completely legal. The lease was in my name. I was the leaseholder. As long as I followed proper notification procedures, I had every right to secure my property. Showed up at the apartment at 9 in the morning with a locksmith and 2 police officers. I'd filed all the proper paperwork. I'd given the required notice, delivered by a process server who'd caught Claire coming out of a Pilates class and Marcus leaving a bar at 2 in the morning. They had 24 hours to vacate. They didn't. So now I was changing the locks. Claire saw me from the window. I heard her screaming before she even got the door open. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, running out into the hallway in her pajamas. "Securing my property," I said calmly. "You received the eviction notice. You chose not to vacate. Now I'm exercising my legal rights." "You can't do this." "I can, actually," I said. "Officers, please make sure Ms. Chen stays back while the locksmith works." One of the police officers stepped between us. "Ma'am, you need to calm down." "This is my apartment," Claire screamed. "Actually," I said, pulling out the lease, "it's mine. My name is on the lease. I'm the leaseholder. You've been living here as my guest, and now I'm revoking that permission." "You're insane. This is illegal." "No, what's illegal is the business you've been running out of a residential property. And the gambling. And the drugs Marcus has been dealing." Her face went white. "What are you talking about?" "I have documentation of everything," I said. "Photos of the poker games, video of Marcus selling cocaine, records of your business shipments, all of it. Would you like me to show the officers?" The second police officer was suddenly very interested. "What's this about drugs?" "Nothing," Claire said quickly. "She's lying." "I have proof," I said, pulling out my phone. "Would you like to see it?" Marcus chose that moment to come stumbling out of the apartment, clearly hungover, maybe still drunk. He took one look at the situation and tried to run. The police officers caught him before he made it 3 steps. "Sir, we need to ask you some questions," one of them said. What followed was chaos. Beautiful, perfect chaos. Marcus, panicking, said all the wrong things. Claire, desperate to save herself, threw Marcus under the bus. The police called for backup. More officers arrived. They searched the apartment. They found the cocaine. Marcus had been stupid enough to keep it in the nightstand. They found evidence of the gambling, cards, chips, cash, betting slips. They found shipping boxes with Claire's business name, stacks of inventory for products she'd been selling online. It was everything I'd known they'd been doing, all laid out for the police to see. Claire and Marcus were arrested on the spot. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs, both of them crying, both of them screaming that this was unfair, that I'd set them up, that I was a psycho bitch sister who'd ruined their lives. "Ms. Chen," one of the officers said to me, "we'll need your statement." "Of course," I said. "I'm happy to cooperate." I gave them everything. Every piece of evidence I'd collected, every document, every photo, every video. I was the concerned sister who discovered her family members were criminals and had no choice but to report them. The officer looked at me with something like pity. "I'm sorry you had to go through this." "Me too," I said, and I even managed to squeeze out a few tears. I just wanted to help them. I never thought they'd take advantage of me like this. After the police left, I stood alone in the apartment doorway. The locksmith had finished. The new keys were in my hand. Everything Claire and Marcus owned was inside. And legally, I had every right to dispose of it however I wanted. I could have sold it all, could have thrown it away, could have donated it to charity. Instead, I did something better. I had it all moved to a storage unit. In Claire's name, with her as the account holder, the fees charged to a credit card I'd opened in her name months ago, using the identity documentation I'd carefully collected. One more debt for her to discover when she got out. One more surprise waiting for her in the ruins of her life. The criminal case moved quickly. Marcus, with his priors and the clear evidence of drug dealing, was looking at serious prison time. He tried to make a deal, offered to testify against Claire, against anyone who would help reduce his sentence. Claire, desperate and alone, tried to claim I'd framed them both, that I'd planted the drugs, staged the evidence, that this was all an elaborate revenge plot. Her lawyer asked her why I would do such a thing. She couldn't explain it, because in this timeline, I had no reason for revenge. I was just the generous sister who'd helped them get an apartment, who'd been betrayed and taken advantage of. The jury didn't believe her. Why would they? I had a clean record, a good job, character witnesses who testified about what a kind, supportive sister I'd been. I had evidence. That I'd been paying the rent myself for months while they lived in luxury. I had the sublease agreement showing I'd tried to protect myself legally. I was the victim here. Claire was the villain. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching as Claire's lawyer tried desperately to paint me as some kind of mastermind, while Claire herself sat at the defense table, looking small and scared and nothing like the confident manipulator she really was. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. The business violations, the illegal gambling, the drug dealing, the fraud. Because yes, they'd also discovered that Claire had been opening credit cards in my name just like in my first life, though she hadn't gotten as far with it this time. Every piece of evidence I'd collected was admitted into the record. Every witness I'd identified gave their testimony. The case against her was overwhelming. Marcus took a plea deal, 5 years for the drug. Charges, testimony against Claire in exchange for leniency on the fraud charges. Claire went to trial and lost. The jury found her guilty on 15 counts, including fraud, identity theft, drug possession, and operating an illegal business. The judge sentenced her to 12 years. I watched as they led her away. She looked back at me just once, and in that moment, I saw recognition in her eyes. Not of what she'd done to me in this life, but somehow, impossibly, of what she'd done in the previous one. "You knew," she mouthed. "You knew everything." I smiled at her, a small private smile, and then she was gone. The landlord, Patricia, was surprisingly understanding when I explained I'd need to break the lease. Given the circumstances, the arrest, the criminal activity in the apartment, she agreed to release me from the contract. "I have to say, Ms. Chen," she said, "I've seen a lot of family scams in my time, but this one was particularly egregious. I'm sorry you had to go through it." "Thank you," I said. "I just want to put it all behind me." The $32,000 in back rent was written off as a loss. My credit score took a small hit, but nothing that wouldn't recover in a few months. And I'd expected it anyway. It was a small price to pay for everything I'd gained. I gained my freedom, my future, my life. In my first timeline, I died at 29 in a prison hospital bed, destroyed by Claire's betrayal. In this timeline, by 24, I'd rebuilt my entire existence. The startup I worked for went public 6 months later. The stock options I'd been carefully accumulating made me a millionaire. I used the money to invest in the companies I knew would succeed, the technologies I knew would take off. Within 2 years, I was wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined in my first life. I moved to San Francisco, started my own company, built a life that was entirely mine, free from the weight of family obligation and manipulation. I dated, I traveled, I lived, and every now and then, I'd check on Claire's Instagram from a fake account. It was still active. Someone was posting for her, maybe Marcus, though he'd been released after serving 3 years of his 5-year sentence. The posts were all old photos, recycled content, desperate attempts to maintain the influencer brand she'd built. But the follower count was dropping. The engagement was dying. No one wanted to follow someone in prison for fraud. Her life, like mine had been, was over. Except I'd gotten a second chance. She wouldn't. 4 years into Claire's sentence, I got a letter. It was forwarded from my old address, as addressed to Emma Chen in careful handwriting. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page, written in Claire's handwriting. "Emma, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect forgiveness. But I need to say this anyway. I know what I did to you was wrong. Not just wrong, evil. I used you. I betrayed you. I destroyed your life for my own benefit, and I never even felt guilty about it. I know you won't believe me, but I've had a lot of time to think in here. A lot of time to realize what kind of person I became. What kind of person I always was, maybe. You were always the better sister, the kinder one, the one who deserved good things. And I hated you for it. I hated that you were smarter, more successful, more genuinely good. So I tore you down. I took everything from you because I couldn't stand to see you happy when I was miserable. I don't know how you knew, how you figured out what I was planning, but you did. And you stopped me, and I'm glad. Because if you hadn't, I would have destroyed you completely. Just like I planned to. Just like I wanted to. I was going to take everything. Your identity, your money, your future. I was going to send you to prison and live your life and never look back. But somehow you knew. Somehow you were 3 steps ahead the whole time. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I was, what I did, and I'm sorry. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. Your sister Claire. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in my fireplace and watched it burn. Some apologies don't deserve acceptance. Some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness. And some sisters don't deserve a second chance. I'd used mine wisely. I'd rebuilt my life piece by piece into something beautiful and strong and entirely my own. Claire could rot in prison with her regrets. I had a future to live. 5 years after the trial, I got engaged. His name was Daniel, and he was nothing like Marcus. Kind, genuine, supportive of my success rather than threatened by it. He'd never even met Claire, didn't know the details of what had happened. I'd told him I had a sister in prison for fraud, and he'd accepted it without judgment. We got married in a small ceremony in Napa Valley. No family on my side. My parents had died when I was young, and Claire was my only sibling. Just friends, colleagues, people I'd chosen to be in my life, rather than people I'd been born into. It was perfect. 3 months after the wedding, I got another letter from Claire. I almost didn't open it, but Daniel saw the return address and asked about it. "It's from my sister," I said. "Are you going to read it?" "I don't know." "You should," he said gently. "You don't have to respond, but you should know what she has to say." So I opened it. This letter was different. Longer. More desperate. Claire was up for parole. She'd served 7 years of her 12-year sentence. She had good behavior, had completed programs, had done everything she was supposed to do. Her lawyer thought she had a good chance of getting out early, but she needed a character witness, someone to testify that she had support on the outside, that she wouldn't re-offend, that she'd changed. She was asking me to be that person. "I know I don't deserve your help," she wrote. "I know I destroyed any right I had to ask you for anything. But Emma, I'm begging you. I can't spend 5 more years in here. I've changed, I really have. I've done the work. I've faced what I did. I'm not that person anymore. Please, just stand up in that parole hearing and tell them I have somewhere to go, that I won't be homeless, that someone believes in me. You don't have to mean it. You don't have to have a relationship with me. Just give me this one chance to rebuild my life the way you rebuilt yours. Please, Emma, I'm your sister. That has to mean something." I showed the letter to Daniel. "What do you think I should do?" I asked him. He was quiet for a long time. "I think," he finally said, "that you've already given her more chances than most people would. But I also think that carrying around anger is exhausting. Maybe this is a chance to let it go. Let it go by helping her. Let it go by making peace with whatever decision you make. If you say no, say it and move on. If you say yes, do it on your terms and move on. Either way, stop letting her take up space in your head." He was right. I'd been carrying Claire with me for years, both lifetimes of years. The betrayal from my first life, the revenge from this one. She'd shaped so much of my existence, even though I'd won. Especially because I'd won. I thought about it for a week. Then I made my decision. I went to the parole hearing. Claire looked older. Prison had aged her in a way that made me almost feel sorry for her. Almost. Her hair was dull, her skin sallow, her expensive veneers looking out of place in a face that had been worn down by 7 years of consequences. She saw me in the audience and started crying. When it was time for character witnesses, I stood up. The parole board asked me to state my relationship to the petitioner. "Claire Chen is my sister," I said. They asked if I would support her release. I looked at Claire, saw the hope in her eyes, the desperate, pleading hope of someone who thought they might finally escape the consequences of their actions. "No," I said. "I don't support her release." The hope died. I watched it happen in real time. "Ms. Chen," the parole board chair said, "can you explain why?" "My sister committed fraud against me," I said calmly. She stole my identity, destroyed my credit, and attempted to frame me for her crimes. She showed no remorse until she was caught. She has apologized, but apologies don't erase actions. I don't trust that she's changed. I don't believe she won't reoffend, and I don't want her released into a society where she can hurt other people the way she hurt me. Claire was sobbing now, loud, ugly sobs that echoed in the small hearing room. "Please, Emma," she begged. "Please don't do this." I looked at her one last time. This person I'd once loved, once protected, once died for. "You made your choices," I said. "Now live with them." I walked out of the hearing without looking back. The parole was denied. I never got another letter from Claire. 10 years after the trial, I sold my company for $300 million. I was 34 years old, independently wealthy, married to a man I loved, living in a penthouse in San Francisco with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. I'd built an empire from nothing. I'd created a life beyond anything I'd imagined in either timeline. I'd won so completely that Claire's betrayal felt like ancient history, a story about someone else entirely. Sometimes I thought about her, rotting in that prison cell. 5 more years of her sentence to go. She'd be 40 when she got out, middle-aged and marked by her crimes, unable to get a decent job or rebuild the life she'd destroyed. I could have helped her, could have given her a second chance the way fate had given me one, but I didn't know her that. Second chances are earned, not given. And Claire had spent both of her chances, the one I'd given her in my first life and the one she'd tried to take in this one. I'd used mine to build something beautiful. She could use hers to learn what consequences really meant. The day Claire was finally released from prison, I was in Tokyo, giving a keynote speech at a tech conference. My assistant mentioned something about a news item, a woman arrested outside a luxury apartment building in Manhattan, claiming she had a right to be there, screaming about identity fraud and stolen lives. The woman's name was Claire Chen. Apparently, she'd gone straight from prison to the apartment building where she'd lived 12 years ago. She'd tried to get into the apartment that had been the beginning of her downfall. She'd insisted it was hers, that she had a right to be there. The current residents had called the police. Claire had been arrested for trespassing and creating a disturbance. She was back in jail within 6 hours of being released. I read the article on my phone and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness, no anger. Just emptiness where Claire used to be. She'd become irrelevant. A footnote in my history. A bad memory that no longer had the power to hurt me. And that, I realized, was the truest revenge of all. Not the prison sentence, not the destroyed reputation, not even the years of suffering she'd endured. But the fact that I'd moved on completely while she remained trapped in the past, unable to let go of what she'd lost. I deleted the article and went to dinner with Daniel, where we celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary and talked about our plans for the future. A future that was bright and unlimited and entirely mine. Somewhere in a jail cell in New York, Claire was probably crying about the life she'd lost. But I wasn't thinking about her. I never did anymore. And that was the happiest ending I could have ever written.